my data, or author some kind of data mapping. Then I'm going to extract the data from that system. Then I'm going to transform it so that it looks like the objects in Salesforce. So I'm going to make, one file that looks like the account object, one file that looks like my contact object, maybe one for activities, opportunities, yada, yada, yada. And then, all right, build that transformation so it looks like that. Then I'm going to download the data loader, pump the data in, verify that everything looks good, and I'm essentially happy. And this is a pretty, at least I found, this is a pretty uniform message across the so it's all well and dandy, but how does this really look in practice? How did this look in practice? So I know a bunch of you guys have done this before. So what you're about to see is going to probably be pretty familiar. For those of you who have not done a data migration, you are going to think that this is absolutely an insane process. So here's what it looks like. The first thing I do is I get on the phone and I call my client and I say, I need your data so I can migrate it to Salesforce. Please give it to me. And then it's on the client to say, how do you want that data? And then you say, the data loader likes CSVs, so give me those. And then they say, okay, here you go. They write some process, dump out the data to CSVs, they give it to you, you open it up, and you're like, you're missing character breaks, and you're missing text quotes, and you have extra commas, and this is no good. And then 3 weeks later, you get a good set of CSVs, and you're ready to move on to the next step. You asked him for CSVs, and then the very first thing you do is you convert it to Excel. You then open the data in Excel, and you start massaging the data so that it looks like what you want it to look like. Then you convert it back to CSVs so you can use it in the data loader. Okay. Next, you start with the first CSV, probably the account object, right? And you load it into Salesforce using the data loader, and you get 2 files back. One is a success file, one is an error file. Probably have a bunch of errors. So you open it in Excel, you clean the data in Excel, take that error file, load it back using the data loader, and then you keep doing that until you get no more error files. And you say, great, I'm ready to move on to the next object. So now what happens is I now have 15 success files because I ran it 15 times. Each error file, give me another success file. So I have to merge those. Again, use Excel, merge all of these files together. The next file, I might be able to use Upsert to get my relationships, but a lot of the objects don't support it. Maybe I'm using a custom object, maybe I'm loading activities. So I'm starting to write complex VLOOKUPs to get my cross-reference data. Then I generate a new CSV out of the Excel, and then repeat the process again. And if I'm doing this for, let's say, 10 objects, I gotta go through this 10 times, right? So this is the standard approach for data migrations. And if you Google it, this is what you will find. And anyone looking at this from the outside will basically think that this is insane. Now we went from this, right? Easy, plan, extract, transform, load, and validate, to this. And these things are literally exactly the same, right? I did not violate this process at all, yet I have this literally insane process that's potentially error, right? So the question is going to become, okay, how do we get to a better process, right? And before we do that, I want to take into a deep dive into exactly why this is so bad. Because a lot of people question, is this really that bad? It's the standard approach. This is how everyone does it, right? And this is why it's so bad. And the number one reason why it's so bad is because it freaking works, right? And now because it works, what happens is I do it, I'm proud, got my migration done, and it's a small migration, and then I do another small migration. Now my confidence is up, I do it a third time, and now I'm ready to take on a big project, and then the thing just absolutely does not scale, and then I fail catastrophically, absolutely catastrophic failure. And I've seen this happen at least a dozen times. So let me explain what I mean by scale. When I say it does not scale, I'm saying three very specific things. I'm dealing with more data, meaning the objects that I'm loading have exponentially more data than I'm used to. I'm dealing with more objects. I'm no longer dealing with accounts and contacts and opportunities. I'm dealing with accounts, contacts, account-contact relations, opportunity, events, tasks, event relations, 4 custom objects, financial accounts, and God knows whatever else. And the last one is more transformations. My client is moving away from a CRM that didn't work because their data model did not support what we're building. That's why I'm going to move to Salesforce, and that's why I got to transform my data, and that means heavy, heavy, heavy transformations, right? So we need to scale up. So what happens if I try to scale up with this approach? One, I don't care if you're on a supercomputer, Excel begins to crawl, right? And crashes repeatedly. And this is just opening the file. Try to open up Excel, and you're waiting there for 25 minutes, and the freaking thing don't open. And then you make a small change, and it changes. Next, Excel starts to modify your data in ways you didn't expect. I have zip codes that start with a 0, and guess what? They're all gone, and now I have 4-digit zip codes. I run into transformations that just simply cannot be done in Excel, so I tell my client, sorry, I can't do that, and basically, essentially give up on that transformation. Again, all of these issues with Excel, it becomes incredibly, incredibly time-consuming. I end up with an object that literally needs 45 transformations on that one object. I end up saying, basically opening Word and keeping notes of every single transformation I need to do. And then what I end up with is like a page or a document that's 8 or 9 pages long of a step-by-step. I gotta check this, I gotta check this, I gotta check this. And that becomes my migration checklist or my migration process document, right? Next time you're going to do this, call the client, hey, I need the latest CSV so we can do our next round of UAT. They give you completely different CSVs. Like new fields added, fields dropped off, formats different, and then you basically gotta, remodify your migration checklist to meet the new file. And then again, if obviously you're gonna get it a third time, it's gonna be different again. Often enough, the client simply can't deliver CSVs, and then it becomes on you to do the extracts. Again, every round of QA requires you to redo all of those steps, and it becomes very long and a very difficult process. And if you're running Agile and you want to have 1 week iterative testing, you're going to waste the first 3 days of that week doing your data migration. Not to mention go live, and nobody's going to allow you to have 3 days without a CRM system. Right? Again, with the runbook, and this is the critical point that people don't realize. I don't care how many rounds of QA you do or UAT you do. If you're going to go back to a manual human process, it's going to be error prone, and your QA is basically worthless. Because how do you know that the human did it the same way? Right? You're just assuming based on practice that they got good at it. And that's no guarantee of consistency. And if they quit in the middle, or you have to switch resources, you have a new resource with a completely new learning curve. Defects get found months later. I have 85 success files, 90 error files, and I'm trying to figure out what did this guy do when they did the data migration. Often they're no longer with the company, and I can't trace back what happened in the data migration to issue a targeted fix, right? And then you end up with taking hours and hours and hours of time just to track down an issue that happened months ago so that you can fix it. So this is why this is so bad. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? And that's where I'm going to talk about attribute-driven design. Right? So what is attribute-driven design? Anybody here has heard of this? Not many people have. Honestly, I came up with the term, then Googled it, and found that it was a real thing. but I liked it, so it's not exactly like legitimate attribute-driven design, but it's close enough. Okay, so it essentially is essentially a method where you pick a set of attributes and you say, this is what I want to accomplish this way, and then everything else you're doing is geared towards making those attributes an actuality, right? So you want to define a set of attributes that's going to enforce both the process and the quality of the data, right? If you looked at our process before, a lot of the issue that we came up with, because it was such a hectic process, we want not only quality data, but also a reasonable process so that our guide doesn't. Okay. Did I go the wrong way? You guys know this guy, Simon Sinek?
Yeah.
Where's our
Golden circle.
Why? I need a picture. Okay. So Simon Sinek is, I don't know, maybe one of my heroes. A little man crush on him. Hey, he has a golden circle. You should probably read his book. He talks a lot about messaging, the man's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. He had a TED Talk. You Google it, Simon Sinek. You'll never be able to spell his name right. S-I-N-E-K. If you have a TED Talk, you can Google him, find his TED Talk. It's about 20 minutes. Really, really awesome. That's where this picture is from. So his book, Start With Why, essentially is, right, you're going to say, you want to start with your goal, and then take your goal and figure out how I'm going to do it so that I accomplish my goal, as opposed to say, oh, what do I need to do? I need to migrate my data. Then I go to how I'm going to do it, and then completely forget about why I'm doing it. That's the client's problem, right? So we're going to start with a set of goals, and that's how we're going to define our attributes going into our attribute-driven design. Okay, so good news for you. I already identified the attributes that you need to have a smoothless data migration, and these are them. First one, it's got to be well planned, right? Telling your client, give me your CSVs and I load it in, is not a plan. That's absolutely not a plan, right? And that's probably the most common plan that you hear today. Give us yours. It's often in the SOW. You give us your SOW, some statement of work. That's the contract, right? The contract says, give us your data CSVs, we will load it in. It needs to be automated. I'm gonna explain all of these in a moment. It needs to be controlled, it needs to be reversible, it needs to be repairable, and it needs to be testable. These are your 6 attributes that are your goals when you're doing your data migration, when you're designing your data migration, is to meet these. Okay, so let's go through them. First, well planned. It's not enough to have a plan. It must be a good plan. And good plans plan for failure, and they plan for problems, and they plan for your timeline, right? And they plan for every possible thing that can go wrong. That's what a good plan is. Well planned is by far the most important attribute, and the reason for that is that any of the other attributes can be compensated for by planning, right? And if you look at the standard approach that we showed before with the data loader, essentially what that's doing is taking all of these other attributes and throwing it into planning. I'm just going to plan everything, and that's how I'm going to go forward. So it's true. You can plan against all of the other ones. So if I can't get to a fully automated, which is the next attribute, I can then plan around it. And I'm going to do that by my, hopefully, 1 or 2 small items that I couldn't automate. I'll plan to do those manually. Okay. So next one is automation. Essentially what that means is I can redo it, all right, with the click of a button. So I want to have a one-click data migration. So literally, press my button, my data goes into Salesforce, and I'm done. Might have to wait an hour. Automation saves time. It saves time. I cannot stress this enough. When I talk through these attributes, that's the #1 argument I get. I don't have time to code all this automation. I cannot stress this enough. Automation saves time. The reason why people say that automation wastes time or costs time is because they're thinking of a data migration as this is one-time disposable code. I'm going to run it once. I don't need to spend the time to automate it. When the truth is, I need to go through 4 rounds of QA and a round of UAT, and then production. So you're talking a minimum 4 or 5 rounds, right? Not to mention it saves you lots of effort. Automation saves time. I cannot stress that enough. Next is control. What I call control is the ability to control the data that goes into Salesforce. So generally, when you look at the way most data migrations are designed, it's either I got to move all my data or none of it. Because I can't move just some contacts because I got to make sure that parent accounts are there. So it's imperative that you have this designed in a controlled way, which means I can set some kind of filter that filters the entire data migration, and I can push a subset of data into Salesforce. This allows me to do rapid fixed and test cycles. So I'm developing the data migration. I can filter it to say only migrate these 5 accounts and all the data related to those 5 accounts. I can then look at the data, validate it, fix my automation, my transformation code, rerun it again, right? That's how developers like to work. If I have a developer sandbox and a developer working in it, and he said, hey, I need some data in there, not a problem, update my connection string, boom, push it in, he's good to go. If we have a sophisticated Salesforce development environment, we're using scratch orgs, right? There's no way to push data into scratch orgs, not a problem. Update my connection string, developer asks for data, boom, push it in. Okay. Reversible. Reversible is the ability to undo a data migration. So the general argument against, like, why do I need to undo a data migration? It's greenfield, right? If we don't go live, not a problem. I refresh the sandbox and you just continue on the legacy CRM for another 2 weeks. The problem with this is that, again, if you're going with some kind of agile approach, I want to do cycles, I need to do a sandbox refresh. I'm only allowed to one full sandbox refresh a month, which means my cycle now becomes a month. Reversibility allows me to back out of the data migration. If it's not greenfield, it's obviously even more critical because I need to back out of my data migration and keep the legacy data or the previous data there in place. There are a lot of tools that do this for you. So if you're not going to a greenfield system, it might pay to invest in one of these, like own backup or this kind of stuff. Okay. And again, it enables proper testing. So when I'm doing QA or UAT, it's important to start over, right? Meaning I need to test the process from start to finish, and that means there's no data in there. Because if I start rerun my data migration and there's already data in there, I don't know if I fixed the problem or if it's just because there was legacy data there that we might have patched during an intermediate round to make the client happy or something like that. Repairable. This is the ability to fix the data in a very targeted way. So I screwed up my data migration, I screwed it up, I found one field that was wrong. 4 months later, I should be able to have a mechanism to fix just that one data point. And testable, I mean, this is obvious. Most data migrations meet the testable part. This basically means that a user can go in and test the data. I like to have my users open up the legacy system, open up Salesforce via the UI, look at it and say, yeah, this looks right. Yeah, that looks wrong. And the best way to do that is obviously with the legacy IDs if possible. Okay. So yeah, data needs to be traceable back to the source. One more very important point is incremental improvements are huge. Partial reversibility is better than no repairability. Partially automated is better than no automation at all. Right? So you don't want to say that I can't automate this fully to one click, so I'm not going to do any automation. It's get 80% of the way. Can't get 80% of the way, get 50%. It's better. Okay. So these 6 attributes are the most critical part of this presentation, I believe. So stop. Anybody have any questions before we move on?